Greetings and welcome to this brief video about preparing for the saxophone all-state auditions for Utah for 2021-22. My name is John Gudmundson. I teach saxophone at Utah State University. Let's just have me play the piece for you and then we'll get into how to prepare for it. All right, well, let's get into looking at this piece of music. Let's start with just some basic housekeeping, make sure we're all on the same page. I've asked the cameraman to pan on the music that you should be playing for this, and so and also the instructions which are on here. It says here wind players are supposed to be playing audition solo 3F, so make sure you find that etude. And there's a picture of it on the video you can take a look at. You will also, it says here, you will use A endings for this piece. So what that means is you can do what I did, which is when I got to my music, I went to the B ending and I just crossed it all out with my pencil because we don't need that. We're just going to play through the A ending. Now, let's talk about the music a little bit. So I'll tell you how I did it, all right? So what I did was I got this music and I looked at it and I said, all right, looks interesting. Let's give it a go. And I just ran it down. I just started in the upper left-hand corner, went to the end, and I did not do it at the marked tempo because I want to get most of the notes. So I did it rather slow. I suggest you try that first. It's always fun just to practice your sight reading and just run it down. But then it's time to roll up your sleeves and get to work. And the first thing I noticed when I played this was I thought to myself, interesting piece. The upper left-hand corner gives you a lot of information on a piece of music. It tells you what key it's in, tells you how fast you should play it. Oftentimes it'll tell you something about the style. For example, when we get to the middle section, we see it says moderato cantabile, tells you play it in a singing style and so forth. So I looked in the upper left and I saw, okay, it's in cut time. The first thing I wanted to see is what key it's in, and there's no sharps or flats in the key signature. That usually means we're in C major or A minor, but not always. And in this case, the very first thing we get is this. So it's like, okay, that's E. That's in the key of E major. All right, fine. But then, right, that's C major. And then, oh, now we're in A flat major. What the heck is going on here? Weird. So that's the third possibility. So the key signature can, when there's no sharps or flats, it could also mean that there are so many key changes in the piece that it just makes it cleaner just to have no key signature at all. So now we look at it a little closer and we say to ourselves, E major, then C major, then A flat major. Then we get to the next phrase and we get E again, and then A flat, E, C. This is jumping around all over the place. So this is something that's called third relationships. I don't want this to turn into a big thing about theory, but let me tell you this. Theory is your friend. If you want to play music, knowing the theory makes our job so much easier. So now instead of playing along and going, holy smokes, what's with all these strange notes and all these accidentals, instead you can look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, E major, C major, A flat major. And in fact, those three major key areas are a major third apart. So if it seems a little bit tricky for you to make all these switches, you could even, if you wanted to, you could take a pencil and just bracket them and put over the top E major, C major, whatever the key of the moment is. That way when you get there, you say to yourself, oh, it's just that. I already know that. Now, here's the thing. If you already know all of your major scales, then you're ahead of the game here because your fingers will be happy to go to these places when you get there. I would suggest this. I would suggest that when you're preparing for this piece of music, if you're going to be practicing this piece every day for whatever, 20 minutes or half an hour, maybe spend the first 5 minutes just playing those 3 major scales, C major, E major, A flat major. Just play the scales. And what will happen is if you do that every day for 5 minutes, your fingers will be so used to playing those shapes that when you play this piece, that won't throw you for a loop, that it's jumping all over the place like this. So what key is this song in anyway? Well, it starts in E and it ends in E, and E gets most of the action here. So I would say it's E major. If we jump back and look at it from 30,000 feet, we also see, oh, I see that it's in 3 sections. It's fast, and then kind of medium, and then fast again. Or the old fast, slow, fast way of writing a piece of music. And in fact, when we get to the middle slow section, we see that all of a sudden a key signature appears, and it's 4 sharps. So we are now either in E major or in C sharp minor, and in fact, we're in C sharp minor. So that makes sense. This is, I think, an extremely cool little piece to be working on for an audition piece because it has so many things in it. But that's my first hint for you to get a handle on this piece is just to play those 3 scales. And then notice them when they come up. You can mark them if you want. Now, after we've noticed this, then it's like, okay, now let's dig into this piece a little bit and see what we can do. When I asked the cameraman to pan over the music, I also had on there a sheet of music on how to prepare music. It's called Preparing Music, the 3 Phases, and it's something that I stole from a fantastic trombone professor named Buddy Baker, and I stole it and I adapted it for my saxophone students. So it's there on the video. If you want me to send you a copy of this, just email me. It's john.gudmundson@usu.edu, and I'll just email you back a copy of this. It's an extremely handy, organized way to look at dealing with preparing music. Not everything in this sheet applies to this piece of music, but it's a good general way to approach any music that you're preparing. Now, so the next thing you want to do when you look at this music is you want to say, okay, where can I breathe? And a lot of the breathing places in this piece of music are rather obvious, but you can, I think it's a good idea to mark them in anyway, simply because in the heat of battle, when the camera's rolling, you might forget where to breathe, and then you're in trouble, right? Because then you can't make the next phrase, or your pitch wavers or something. So when it comes to finding breath spots, I look for ends of phrases, and I also follow the rule of Robin Hood, which is to steal from the rich. So the very first line of this, we have a phrase, and then the line ends with a nice big rich half note. So in other words, that half note can spare it. So put the breath mark after the half note, don't play the half note all the way, and go on. Line 3, same thing, there's a half note, put one there. Line 5, put one at the end of that line. And then when you get to the very end of that 6th line, just before the moderato cantabile, we have a caesura, railroad tracks, which means you can recover and then go on to the new section. So that's an obvious place to breathe there. When you get to the moderato cantabile, what we see is we have this phrase and then an obvious place to breathe. I would mark a double breath mark there, or some people put BB for big breath, because then you've got a long way to go before you get to breathe again. So then we get to the allegro part, same thing, end of the first line, breath, end of the second line, breath. Then we get to the A ending, And I would suggest, again, being Robin Hood and going to the fourth measure where we have a half note there, that high C, and breathe there, and then you got the ending. Coming up. So that's what works for me, probably will work for you. When you're practicing the piece, you're going to be practicing it much more slowly than what's marked, so you might have to breathe more often than that. So don't worry about that. As it comes up, you'll get there. A couple other things that are tricky about this piece that I think we should talk about. One of them is the time signature. So it begins in cut time. So we've got this ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. So cut time means it's kind of like 4/4, but it has a pulse of 2 strong beats per measure. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the subdivision is those eighth notes. Then pretty soon we get to 6/8, and 6/8 is similar in that it also has 2 strong pulses, but then it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, 3 per beat instead of 4. But here's the thing. Do not think that those strong pulses remain the same, because they do not. The composer has very smartly added at the beginning of the 6/8 in the second line, he has eighth note equals eighth note. So that means the eighth notes are the same. So that means that pulse is not the same. Now we're going to go from this, da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba, we're going to go same eighth notes. Da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-da. So it's kind of cool, kind of sounds jazzy there. So just make sure that you keep the eighth notes the same. So if you have your metronome clicking on the pulse of the cut time, that could be a little bit confusing. It's going to turn your beat around because of how many measures of 6 are in line 2. So in the beginning, maybe you could have the metronome just doing the eighth notes or the quarter notes, something like that. Later on, when you get fast enough to where you can have the pulse happening, I would suggest putting it on the offbeat. 1, 2, ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba-da. And then you get back to the da-ba-da-ba-da, and you're back on again. All right, so just be aware of that. That's something that's kind of a tricky thing about this piece that you need to prepare for. What else did I write down? There are things that we should probably look at. Oh yeah, another thing that's a good thing to look at that could be a little catchy spot. When we get to the moderato cantabile towards the bottom of the first page, what you have is some nice rhythmic variation. We've got quarter notes, then eighth notes, then sixteenths, then quarter, triplet 8, straight 8. That's a lot of craziness in a row. So we got, here's what I'm afraid might happen. So here's the thing, the moderato cantabile. I'm afraid you might do this. Playing that as if it's 16th notes. D, da, 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 but it's not. It's da, 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 da. So just be aware of that. It's a little thing that people will be looking for when they listen to your performance. So what I would do is when I get to the third measure of the moderato cantabile, when you play that G sharp on the downbeat, think da, 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 da. So start thinking about the triplet eighths right before you get to them. So start subdividing in your head during the quarter note, then you'll be right in time for that subdivision when you get there in the third bar. So that's a tricky thing to look out for. Another thing that's something worth looking at, I love this piece. This piece has like something for everyone. When we get to the very end of the middle section, so it's the top line of the second page, we have it ends with the last 2 notes being a C sharp and a D sharp. So we need to be thinking about pitch. And so the thing about the saxophone is that an open C sharp can sound flat. So we need to be careful to keep that note up. And it's immediately followed by a middle D sharp, which is famous for being a sharp note on the saxophone. And it's the end of that section. So you want to have, what you might consider doing is you want to check yourself with a tuner, and then if it's what I think it will be, a flat C sharp and then a sharp D sharp, maybe take a pencil and over that C sharp, write an up arrow to remind yourself to keep that note up, and over the D sharp, write a down arrow to remind yourself to keep that note down. There are some things you can do to help those notes out. You probably know that it's easier to bring a note down than to get a note up, especially a note like that C sharp. So just think about always, when you're thinking about pitch, think about having a really strong support, lots of air support. That's the first thing. Next thing, for that open C sharp, think about maybe having a very east-west kind of oral cavity for that C sharp. Check it with the tuner and get that C sharp as close to the middle as you can. And there's a cheating thing you can do. You can vent it if you want. Here's a C sharp. If I add this, that's my middle right side key. That brings the pitch up. Cheating, but hey, any port in a storm. That's an option for you. And then when you get to the D sharp, you can just bring it down with your embouchure. And you can practice that. Oh, there's also a trick for bringing that down. But I like to maybe not do any of those tricks. Sometimes you have to, but it's better just to get good at playing in tune as best you can and dealing with the limitations of the saxophone. Okay, so that's that. I'm thinking that's the general things that I would have you watch out for on this piece. What I love about this piece is it's got so many different things in it. It's got varied rhythms in it. It's got various articulations. You're slurring sometimes, you're tonguing, you're staccato, there's accent in there. It's got technical and lyrical playing. It's got those intonation challenges that I was talking about that we need to watch out for. It's got the fun third relationships that we talked about. And actually, it's a very fun tune to play. So bravo to Brad Edwards for writing this piece. It's a good job there. So that is my spiel on that. Again, look at that sheet from Buddy Baker that I adapted from him on just music preparation generally. I think it'll help you out a lot. There's one other thing we need to look at, and that is the scale for this audition. And that is, they want you to play a chromatic scale, concert B flat, 2 octaves. Now, it's quite possible that when they wrote that out, they forgot to think about this instrument because, we can't do that very easily without going into altissimo. What I would suggest is when it gets to that, if you're playing a tenor or a soprano saxophone, of course, it's going to be low C to high C and then back down again. On the alto or the baritone saxophone, of course, you're going to start on G, and it depends on your saxophone. Some of you will have a high F sharp key. Probably none of you will have a high G key. I could show you the altissimo fingering for high G. It's octave key 1 and 3, 1. Bottom right side key is the typical fingering. It's a nice solid high altissimo G. But it's up to you. If you want to wow the judges, you could put that in, but it's not necessary. For me, when I listen to people playing a scale, I'm much more interested in how musical it sounds. That's my most important thing. So have it sound pretty and in tune and even. It's marked, what does it say on here? They have a tempo marked for this. What does it say? Tempo needs to be quarter note equals 120. So eighth notes at 120. So about that tempo. So start on G, go to your highest note, whether that happens to be an F or an F sharp, and then come back down again. The only other thing that I would say is it would be nice if you were to use the typical chromatic fingerings. So on the saxophone, that means that when you get up to B and you need to go to C, instead of going B, C, you go B, C, the middle right side key. And also it means when you go from A to A sharp or B flat, instead of going from here, don't go to bis or 1 and 1 or something weird like that. Just go A and then bottom right side key. So in slow motion, here we go. I'll start in G. So I went A, A sharp, bottom right side key. B, B sharp, otherwise known as C. This is the middle C, and then C sharp and the rest. Then the only other fingering I want you to be thinking about is when you get to F, you go from F, instead of going F to this F sharp, you're going to go F to this chromatic F sharp. Ring finger on this key. So put it all together. I'll do it slow. So that kind of fingering. A quick anecdote from my own development as a player. When I was a freshman in college, I was just getting going, and I had already gotten really good at my major scales. I knew all 12 of them at a very fast tempo, very clean. But my teacher looked at me and said, well, gee, that's fast, but you know what? You're using the wrong fingerings for some of these scales. And she forced me to use the right fingerings. And it was kind of murdered because I had to unlearn the old wrong way and learn the new way. It slowed me way down. It was very frustrating. But she said at the time, you're going to hate me now, but you're going to thank me later because you're going to be glad you have these fingerings under your fingers. And it turned out she was right. These chromatic fingerings, these various ways of doing B flat, for example, and using chromatic F sharp, there's going to be pieces you're going to play that's going where those fingerings are going to save you. So trust me, it's good to learn these fingerings. So there we have it. In a nutshell, that's my spiel on the piece and on the scales for this. Let me just close by saying to you, congratulations for doing this, for auditioning for All-State. It's one of the, and you might think, why am I congratulating you? Because maybe you won't get into the All-State band. While that is the goal, that's not really the important thing about this. The important thing is that you're working on this good music, and it's making you a better player. This is really one of the situations where literally everybody wins. Yay to you and to your band director for supporting you in doing this, and for you putting the work and the time in to get good at this music. It's going to be a wonderful thing. So there you have it. If you have any questions, you can always email me at john.gudmundson@usu.edu. I would be happy to send you that sheet about preparing music that I stole from Buddy Baker and altered somewhat. So drop me a line, and best of luck to you on your All-State auditions.